Welcome to the Hamumu Halloween Home Horror Hoedown, the podcast where we watch scary movies so you don't have to.
From award-winning to completely unknown, we take them all way too seriously.
I'm your host, Mike Hummel.
And I'm your host, Solange Hummel.
Now, warning, we use a ghoulish number of spoilers, so watch the movies first.
Second warning, we don't know anything about anything, so don't take us seriously as we take these movies seriously. We did something fun with this week's movie.
We always do something fun with our movies.
It's true, because we're
fun.
But also, we did something even more fun than usual.
Uh-huh.
Because while we watched Waxwork from 1988, we had your sisters here and we were all playing movie bingo.
Movie bingo? How does that work?
It's very simple, really. This is not something we invented. We were taught how to do this by my cousin, I believe. But it's very simple. You pick a movie no one has seen. You make a bingo board 5x5 with a free space in the center. And you watch the first 10 minutes of the movie. Then you pause and you fill in your bingo board with things that you think might happen during the movie.
So everybody has their own unique bingo board. They're not sharing what's going on. It's secret. It's not really secret, but they're not sharing it.
Yeah, everyone creates their own board based on what they think is happening in this movie. And you don't watch the previews. You can read the description of it like on Netflix or whatever. In fact, I would recommend that. Having done that would have helped me immensely during my movie bingo game for this movie. And then as you watch the rest of the movie, if something that you put on your bingo board happens, you cross it off and you shout to the rest of the group that this thing happened.
Yeah. I mean, it's not... Technically, it's about getting bingo, but what it's really about is going, hey, the thing I wrote happened, everybody. And they can be like, oh, that was smart of you to put that in.
Yeah. Or like something happens in the movie and you're like, no, drop it. You have to drop the glass. I don't get it doesn't count unless you drop it. You know, things like that. It's a game that causes a lot of talking and shouting during the movie. So if you don't like that, don't play this game.
I mean, yeah, you're not going to use it for a movie you're going to be deeply invested in.
No.
It's for fun times.
So we played that with this movie, and it was possibly the worst game of movie bingo that I have ever had in terms of what I was able to cross off.
Things were a little bit different on my side of the couch.
It's true.
Because I got double bingo.
I think that's the first time that any of us have ever gotten bingo on any of the movies, even the ones that we got to cross a lot of things off on.
Yep. I've never gotten bingo before, but this was double.
Very impressive.
Yeah. What's really fun about it is you can put down really simple things, like I got credit for decapitation. A decapitation occurred.
Sure.
So hooray. But then if you put something really specific... then you can like circle it or whatever, and everyone can be really impressed that you got that one. Like, for example, I put, after somebody dies, they appear in wax form in the exhibit. And I got that checked off, and my sister was like, circle that, that's so good.
Yeah.
Because it was very specific. On the flip side, you could write something specific like, the caretaker closes up shop and moves on to another town, and be wrong because you were way too specific.
Yeah. The thing is, specificity gives you like extra cred because, ooh, impressive.
Yeah.
But it definitely does make it harder.
Yeah.
And you can be like as simple as you want to be. There was a movie we watched a while ago where I was just like, there were 7 different characters and I filled 7 spots with character A dies, character B dies, character C dies. And you could also then fill 7 more spots with character A lives, character B lives. Like, there's
that's a bad idea.
No, I know. But you don't have to have any rhyme or reason to what you put on your board, is what I'm saying.
Indeed.
So, having explained that game, which I now hope you all play, it's especially good for playing with Hallmark holiday romance movies because they're so predictable. I'll just say that. But now that we've explained this game, perhaps we should talk a little bit about the actual movie.
What's
Waxworks.
fun is we've seen a bunch of movies in which they explain a game and then go on to have a movie.
Right?
So this could be one of those movies. But it's not. We're talking about Waxwork, 1988.
Yes.
This movie opens with extreme violence.
Yeah, it does.
As a man is lit on fire in the face and...
Like his head is shoved in a fireplace and then he's on fire.
And he's just collapses back into the fireplace, which totally got me thinking about the actor doing that. Like it's one thing to do the whole get lit on fire thing, but then just to put your face right in a fire pit.
Yeah.
It's very scary.
Yeah. And someone else was like bashing in a bunch of glass and stealing a bunch of things, and it was chaos.
Chaos indeed. But that was just the past. In the present, we have a group of 7 wacky teens that have been invited to go to the local Waxwork, which didn't exist yesterday, apparently. And
just suddenly appeared in like a suburban... It was basically like a suburban house suddenly was labeled Waxwork. And they were like, that's an odd place for a wax museum.
Then Willy Wonka popped up in front of it and was like, come on in. And he was sure dressed like Willy Wonka.
Yes, he was. These 2 college girls were totally into him. They were like,
yes.
Especially the one girl who, like the hipster girl was like,
well, she was into everybody.
Okay. Yeah.
So they are invited to a special midnight trip into the Waxwork, and they go to it. And of course, like you would assume with any Waxwork exhibit, if you step over the rope into the exhibit, you are transported to the world of whatever scene they're showing.
Yes. Which when I was creating my bingo board, I was thinking more of like historical waxwork. So I had all kinds of interesting historical events for them to show up in, and none of that happened because these were in fact wax exhibits of like horror scenes, which when I think about it after the fact makes perfect sense.
Horror movie. Here's the thing that doesn't make sense about that. Later in the movie, someone explains to them how the magic is working, and it's that if the ritual is completed, which is someone going into the exhibit and getting killed by the exhibit, then evil souls from history shall live again. The evil souls depicted in there. Evil souls from history such as the Phantom of the Opera, Dracula, a werewolf, a demon baby, an alien, a mummy. I wrote Crypt Keeper. I'm not even sure which one that was. And a snake man.
Yeah.
All, the famous historical figures that the Republicans are trying to get out of our history books. And that is wrong. People aren't learning their history anymore.
If you don't learn your history about the alien evil souls, you're bound to repeat it.
Yeah, as soon as you step over that velvet rope.
Yeah. Yeah, it was less history and more fiction.
Yeah. There was the Marquis de Sade was in there. I don't know if anybody else was historical in that whole thing. I mean, I guess Dracula is technically a historical figure.
Maybe.
I
don't know. Yeah, so they had to take these teenagers, these 20-somethings playing early college students. And in the midst of all of that, we were also dealing with a lot of college drama. Like, in between the scenes where one individual person is sucked into a exhibit and, becomes a werewolf or gets whipped by the Marquis de Sade or what have you, in between that, we're just watching this group of friends have the most drama.
Yeah, they're all caught up in their relationships.
There was a lot of them sitting on the bleachers on the side of the football field, like being angsty at one another.
Yeah. And when they weren't out of class doing that, they were in class in their history of fascism class, I guess.
It sort of seemed like Nazi training class.
Yeah. The teacher was 100% a Nazi. Written on the board, it said, fascism, does it work? And it was pretty clear what his opinion was.
Yeah. I also liked how when Mark showed up late to class, he assigned him a 20-page essay.
Yeah.
And then immediately, because Mark got sassy, immediately signed him an additional 40-page essay, both of which were due the next day.
Right.
You know, like colleges do.
Yeah, I mean, it's not unreasonable to expect someone to write 60 pages in a day, in half a day.
Half a day. It was fine, though, because Mark just took it home and told the maid to do it.
Yeah, so Mark was a super rich kid.
Mark was a beanbag.
The first scene in the movie, after the horrible burning, is the classic rich people sitting at an incredibly long table, one at each end, barely able to hear each other.
With a huge, floral display in between that they had to, lean around.
That was amusing.
Uh-huh. Yeah. But instead of it being... Usually it's like a husband and wife, like an estranged couple sitting, 18 feet apart at the ends of the table. Instead, it was Mark and his mother. And Mark, who is a whole college student, is being chastised by his mother for wanting to drink caffeine.
Yeah, he wants to drink caffeine in the morning. And it turns out the butler, Jenkins, is enabling him.
Oh.
Gives him his caffeine and his nicotine.
Yeah. Mother would be so upset.
Mother would be.
So this movie had a little bit of anthology to it because of the little mini vignettes that happened each time one of the people got sucked into an exhibit. Mm-hmm. Which of the exhibits did you find most entertaining or which one did you like best?
The one that kept my interest the most was our visit to the werewolf cabin. And perhaps because it was the first one, but it also seemed like it had the most going on, where he was going in there and he didn't understand anything about the situation he was in, which I guess none of them did, but since he was the first one, they made it seem more like he didn't understand than the others.
Well, because they get pushed into the exhibit and then they become a character in the exhibit, but they still think they are themselves, and everyone else in the story thinks that they are someone. So Tony gets pushed into the exhibit and they're all like, Jack, welcome, nice to see you.
Yeah.
And then Jack gets eaten by a werewolf.
Yeah, and also shot because he turns into a werewolf.
Right.
Which, that's pretty fun too. So I kind of enjoyed that. But I have to say, that's a tough question because the vampire story had some of the more insanity going on with Charles.
Yes, so in that one, China gets pushed in and she finds herself at a dinner party where all the other guests are clearly vampires.
Very clearly.
And she is invited to sit down, and I guess it's that she's vampires have the ability to...
She's mesmerized.
Yeah, mesmerize you. So she just sits down, and they offer her a delicacy, which is disgusting.
Yeah, it's chunks of meat. It's Alpo.
If Alpo were raw.
Yeah, it's red Alpo.
With a delightful sauce.
IMDb trivia, it was watermelon, strawberries, and rhubarb. Not bad.
It looked disgusting.
It sounds pretty good.
And so she eats it and then goes off to her room and whatever. There's other things. And then eventually she finds herself in the basement where her fiance, not China's fiance, but the fiance of the person China is embodying, is tied onto a table. And between his knee and his ankle is just bone.
On one leg.
On one leg. He's fine. He's talking and communicating with everybody and really upset. He's in pain, but he's upset. But he is entirely missing all of the flesh and non-bone pieces of his lower leg.
Yeah, my note was that he was taking it very well.
He really was.
Until a rat came over and started nibbling on the bone, and he was like, "Oh!"
Yeah, he didn't like that. And then at one point, one of the vampire guys was trying to get across him to attack China, and flung himself across, and that was clearly, it would be painful.
Yeah, that was really that vampire trying to get at her. He could not figure out how to get around the table.
No. Yeah, that one was something else. And then she uses 2 knives to make a cross, and
which we learn a cross shoved against a vampire's forehead makes his head explode.
Yes, which was particularly gory. And then the vampire ladies were coming after her, and one of them got shoved up against a wall of like champagne bottles.
Yeah.
And so she's like impaled, because you all know champagne bottles on the, the cork end of a champagne bottle is really sharp and would go right through a vampire body.
Yeah, that's not something you really notice in a lot of movies, is vampires seem to be very soft, very low density. You just go right through them.
Yeah. The thing I found most amusing was that once those bottles went through her, the corks all came off, and so she was like spewing champagne from various parts, holes in her.
Yeah.
It was something.
Everything about that made perfect sense.
Yes. Personally, I don't know that I can say I liked it the most, but one of the ones that stands out to me is the Marquis de Sade one.
Yeah, it definitely stands out.
Because of how, like, weirdly BDSM erotic it was.
Well, and it feels like this movie is real BDSM shaming. Like,
yes.
Sarah...
who was the totally naive, innocent, like pure one of the bunch.
Who somehow she was like just so drawn to the Marquis de Sade that like when it was just a wax museum, she was just walked up to that exhibit and would just stare. And she was just entirely obsessed. And then when she got in there, she was like, whip me more.
Yeah, she was super into the whipping, which, like, do your thing, Sarah. I don't care. But, yeah, super into it, which was weird because it wasn't, like, there wasn't any of that in any of the rest of the movie. Like, this was just the one place where there was this weird eroticism happening.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the vampires, but you kind of expect it with vampires. Vampires are sex.
Yes. Wait. That was... from home, actually.
Yeah. Zombies are loss of control of the middle class, and vampires are sex.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was weirdly out of place. And I totally agree with you. It was trying to make her like, it wasn't the Marquis de Sade who was bad for whipping her. It was her who was bad for wanting to be whipped. Yeah,
there was something to that where it just was like, what's wrong with this girl? And there was even this weird Pulp Fiction moment where they're hanging out totally outside the waxwork. They're in Mark's attic, and she opens up a book she finds about the Marquis de Sade, and it glows at her, and she's like, this book. It's very strange, like so obsessed. She couldn't... I mean, it was a special awakening for her, but then apparently what she ends up learning is that it's wrong to feel that way, and she needs to be rescued by a man.
Well, yeah. She didn't want to be rescued, though.
Not at all. She literally wanted to die from it.
Yeah. It was weird.
Yeah.
It was weird. So that one stands out. Like I said, I don't know that I can say it's my favorite, but it stands out.
Yeah.
Perhaps my favorites were the ones where Jonathan went into the Phantom of the Opera exhibit, and then we just see him dead in the exhibit as a wax figure, and we have no idea what happened in there.
We missed the entire thing.
Or the entire culmination of the thing. Like, all of these different people go in, they try to get their final person, but Mark fights off the Marquis de Sade or whoever. Like, he saves himself and Sarah because he knows that if you just don't believe, then they don't have any power over you.
Right.
So he saves them, and oh my gosh, everything is going to be terrible, except James and Gems.
James and Gems.
Who had, like, bailed way early on, were like, nope, this is too creepy, we're going home.
Yeah.
They came back and went into the Marquis de Sade exhibit, and then boom, it's done. Like,
and the zombie one.
Oh, yeah. And it's the end. It's the pinnacle of what's happening, and we don't see it happen. It just is like, oh, now it's over.
Well, then we do get a fantastical climax to the whole movie, which is Wilfred, who we haven't mentioned at all. Wilfie shows up with an entire army of old people with rakes and torches. Yeah. And they all come storming in, and it's just a massive brawl between them and the evil souls of the past, which we all know from history, like the demon baby.
Yes, melee battle.
It's insane.
And Jenkins is there, the butler. Of
course Jenkins
the enabling
is there.
Butler.
Where else would Jenkins be?
Yeah, and Mark gets to fence with the Marquis de Sade.
Good thing he's a rich kid who's apparently taken a lot of fencing lessons.
Apparently. And I have the note at the end that Sarah saves him. So she gets a little bit of a redemptive arc there at the end.
The redemption of BDSM bad. You
Right.
are free now.
Right.
Yeah. So that happened. But then there's a great death of the villain, Willy Wonka. He falls into a vat of hot wax, just as you would assume he would in this story. Like, what a perfect ending. Only after he's been in the wax for a few seconds, they're all like, oh, good, he's dead. He pops back up, completely unharmed in any way.
Barely. He has, like, little pieces of wax attached to him, but other than that, like, totally fine. Yeah. Nothing even on him.
He pops up and he's like, I don't know what he said, but, hey, I'll get your little dog too. And then falls over backwards into the wax and is dead now.
Yeah.
It's quite a finale.
Quite a finale. So one thing that I noticed was that Sarah being kink shamed was not the only, like, questionable thing that happened. There was for lack of a better word, like a quote unquote pygmy character.
Yeah.
Came out of one of the exhibits and was, like, out during the melee battle, which was very much like that stereotypical cartoon African character.
Yeah.
And then earlier on, when the cop goes into the mummy's tomb exhibit, there is what I think, like, kind of in the background, there's a character who's, like the desert equivalent of a Sherpa.
He's the guy who guided them into the tomb. Yeah. Clearly. And we know that because
he is in blackface, basically.
Well, brown face.
Yeah, but it was clearly not a brown person made to look brown.
Yep.
That was a problem. They also had the Hispanic maid write his 60 pages of essay on dictators.
Which turned out to be 2 pages.
Yes, in very questionable broken English.
Yeah.
Which, fine. Her English skills were better than my Spanish skills are. I'm not critiquing her. I'm critiquing the fact that her having broken English was a ha-ha moment.
Yeah.
Not cool. Oh, and then there in the museum, there was the tiny butler, who was a little person, and the giant butler, who was like a lurch kind of character, and, lots of stuff about that.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a trip back to the 80s and their level of acceptance.
Yeah. And then the fact that Nazi teacher, I really thought, like, there was going to be some kind of payoff about how Nazis are bad, but that never really happened.
Yeah, or even if there was a Nazi exhibit, Evil Souls from History, I think we could probably come up with a Nazi we could put in there.
Maybe one.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. The fact that like, Chekhov's Nazi never, like, showed up again.
Yeah, I think the creators of this movie were just like, this is what a college professor sounds like.
They're indoctrinating kids at college.
This is perfectly normal. This is just a regular class.
It was weird. Ratings. So this was not the best movie we've watched all year.
Well, not in terms of outright quality. No.
No, it was the perfect movie for playing movie bingo.
It was great.
I will say that.
Yeah.
This is the kind of movie you want. You want something that's ridiculous, that's going to go for all the stupid tropes, that's just going to, like, wallow around in the things you expect.
Yeah.
Right? This definitely did that. And it was funny in places. Like, because it was so just ridiculous. Like, it was almost slapstick in its humor.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, I think part of that is because it was from the 80s and then it was throwing back a ways. Like it wasn't
it
trying
was
to be a modern 80s movie.
doing Universal movie monsters.
Yes. So like it had its funny moments, but overall it was like most of the movies in the 80s where it just didn't really hold up. I shouldn't say most of the movies in the 80s. There are some great 80s
There's
movies.
some very great ones.
But like when an 80s movie doesn't hold up, it doesn't hold up in a big way. You know what I mean? Like they just went all in. If they were the kind of movie that was doing the inappropriate things, they just went all in for inappropriateness. And this one had quite a bit of inappropriateness.
Yeah, I mean it was a B movie with that intent. Like
Yes.
it wasn't even like really a comedy. There weren't a lot of jokes. It was just a very intentionally dumb
Yes.
horror movie.
Yeah. It just was a kind of humor that I probably sadly would have thought was funny in the 80s. Mm-hmm. And thankfully in the last 40 years have matured out of a lot of that humor, because a lot of it is not funny and probably never was, and definitely never was to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I can give movies more points, even if they had some of that like, ugh, from the time period, if there was something else for it. But in this one, like the sets were not good.
No.
The acting was not good. The story wasn't that interesting. There just wasn't anything to it.
I mean, it was definitely a bowl of insanity.
Yeah. So I am going to give Waxwork 1 inexplicable harmonica player out of 5.
Yeah.
I
mean, it's a throwback.
There wasn't much there. I don't feel like people need to watch this movie.
That's true. But I found it a very fun experience, in part because of the movie Bingo. Mm-hmm. But because it is so dumb, making fun of that and enjoying the silliness, that was a fun time for me. And I liked that. So it was a good time. It was a good time.
It was a romp.
It was definitely a romp. So for me, I'm going to 3 inexplicable harmonica players out of 5, because truly an enjoyable experience. Not a good movie, but that's okay. It's a good bad movie.
Agree to disagree.
No.
It was a mediocre bad movie.
No, we're going with what I say.
Okay. That's in keeping with the whole 80s vibe.
Yeah. Well, I got credit for a girl giggles at terrible misogyny in my movie Bingo.
Yeah, that happened real early on, didn't it?
Yeah, it was very early.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's that.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us in the 80s, everybody, and we'll be back next week with another fine film.
Another fine film?
A possibly, maybe more fine film. There's a chance.
Ooh. All right, well, I will see you next time.
All right, bye, everybody. Blur, blah, blah, blah. This is all being recorded for posterity, by the way.